Alright, what up everybody, Colton Nerdy Core, back here with another video. This one will be another 2019 collection video. As promised, this will be the PS4 collection video. I'm looking to do this and then move on to a hidden gems video for the PS4, which I've like half gotten through so far, so look for that to be the next video on the channel. My PS4 collection is actually one that has grown a decent bit since 2018, so it'll be cool to update all these new games and talk about the new games I picked up, and also start to add the rating system to all the games I've previously talked about to kind of keep it interesting from people who watched it in 2018. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. Alright, so first up we got Far Cry New Dawn. For the initial part of the video, I will just be going over some games I haven't played yet, but these are ones I've gone through in my collection update videos. So Far Cry New Dawn, I got this one a couple months ago, and I'm eventually looking to get into it, just haven't got around to it yet. It's probably the next one I'm going to play. Next up is Final Fantasy Type 0. It's like the HD remaster of it. I'm hoping to get into this. I'm not really a huge Final Fantasy fan in terms of like my history with it, but I'm hoping that one can get me into it. Next is Nier Automata. I've heard a lot of good things about this game. I'm pretty sure it's like a hack and slash RPG with a lot of good story elements. So this is one I'm actually pretty excited to play through. Still haven't got to it yet. Then we got Red Dead Redemption 2. This one I actually got, like, I would say a third of the way through, and then I just kind of got into other games. But it's one I'm eventually looking forward to go back in. That's why it's still in my haven't played pile. So what I've played for it so far, it's actually pretty good. I wouldn't say it's as good as Red Dead 1, in my opinion, but it's still a pretty good game. Alright, then we got Uncharted Lost Legacy. I actually got this one for Christmas, I think 2 years ago or a year ago. It's just one I haven't got through because I haven't still played Uncharted 3, 4, and then I'll play this one after. So it's just on a list of a lot of Uncharted games I still have to finish. And then speaking of Uncharted, there's Uncharted 4 at Thieves' End. I've heard a lot of good things about this game, so I'm hoping it is a good ending to the series. If it is the ending, I won't know until it's like the actual ending, until I actually play through it, but I'm hoping it's a good game. Alright, now we're getting into the actual games for my collections that I played. First up is Assassin's Creed Black Flag. This one I would actually say is one of the better Assassin's Creed. I would say this, 2, and probably Revelations are probably the best in the series. I actually really enjoyed this one. The ship combat's a lot of fun, and exploring all the different like islands and stuff like that is really fun and enjoyable to do. I would probably give this game somewhere around an 8. I would say it's definitely an above average game, and it's one of the better Assassin's Creeds. Alright, next up is Assassin's Creed Unity. This is one that was kind of disappointing for me. They got rid of the multiplayer, which was really fun. It was like a hide and seek mechanic thing, and went with kind of a co-op thing. And the game itself wasn't as good as some of the other Assassin's Creed, like Black Flag. It's still a solid Assassin's Creed game, but it had a ton of glitches when it first came out, and that's when I first played it. So off of that, I would just give it a 5. It's an average game. Alright, next up is Battlefield 4. This is actually one of the better Battlefields in my opinion. This one, Bad Company 2, and I think World War 1, I think it's just Battlefield 1, were some of my favorites. This one I like specifically more so for the multiplayer. If I was to pick any of the multiplayers to go back to, it would be this or Battlefield Bad Company 2. I'd probably give this game like a 7.5. Battlefield, like all these Call of Duty and Battlefield games won't get a super high score just because they're kind of the same thing all the time. But you know, it was one of the better ones. And then following that, we got Battlefield 1. This game was actually pretty good. I actually enjoy the story pretty good in this game. It has a bunch of like different branching stories from different times in World War I. And the multiplayer is still pretty good. I just didn't get into it as much as 4. I'd probably give this game a 7.5 as well, but more so for the campaign than the multiplayer. Alright, next up we got Star Wars Battlefront 2. This game, I would say, in terms of if I got it when it first came out, I would give it a very low score because of all the microtransactions and the lack of content off the start. But I picked this up like for $10 probably about 3 months ago, and I'm actually having a lot of fun with the game. The campaign's trash, the AI is trash in the game, but the multiplayer is actually really fun, and I would really recommend it if anybody's looking for a cheap multiplayer game to get into. They got rid of all the loot boxes and stuff like that and replaced it with just player progression through playing. So it definitely got better on that front. I would probably give this game a solid 7. Alright, next up is BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle. This is one I was actually really excited for when it came out. Just because I was a big fan of BlazBlue and the fighting system that is in it. And also, Persona 4 is one of my favorite games of all time. This game is actually pretty good. My only issue with this game is that it's a dumbed down version of the BlazBlue combat. It's very much, it's like you're playing on there's like stylish mode and simplest mode. Simple mode would be like just the square would do like a combo instantly for you. This is this style of game, and that's the only way you can play this game. That's my only issue with the game, but overall it's fun. The community is still active, and they're introducing new characters all the time. I would probably give this game somewhere like a 7.7, 7.6-ish. Alright, next up is Bound by Flames. This one actually caught me by surprise. It was actually pretty decent. It's kind of like I would say almost like a Witcher mix with like Dark Souls-y type of combat and a Witcher style level up system with a kind of story. It's a decent story. It's just kind of like an end of the world demon type story. Very generic fantasy story. But I actually really enjoyed it. There are like different characters you interact with, and the progression system's actually really good in this game. I'd probably give it like a 7. Definitely an above average game. Alright, now we're into the breadth of the Call of Duty games, so I'm going to go through these really quick. Advanced Warfare, actually one of the better story games in the Call of Duty franchise. Hated the multiplayer though, so I'd probably give this game like a 6. Alright, then we got Black Ops 3, one of the better multiplayer games, I think, personally, and it had some decent zombies maps. The campaign was kind of dumb though. I'd probably give this game probably like a 7. Alright, next up is Call of Duty Black Ops 4. This is the newest one, and the main reason I don't really like this game is they got rid of the campaign. I know a lot of people who play Call of Duty don't give a crap about the campaign. I like playing through the campaigns. I find them fun for like a single playthrough. They're usually just a little fun with some decent combat, okay story, and you just get to shoot some people and have a little fun. So for them taking it out, I would give this game like a 5. It's still an okay multiplayer game, but it's not great. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, I think, is probably the most underrated Call of Duty, just because everybody hated that it was still futuristic. I was one of the people. I've gotten tired of the whole futuristic thing for Call of Duty and all these shooters. But the zombies and campaign in this game are actually really good, and I think this game's really underrated. I would probably give this game like a 7.3. I would say it's probably the best COD on the console. Alright, next up is World War II. I think this is one of the more balanced COD games. It had a pretty good story. It still had a campaign. The zombies was pretty decent, and the multiplayer was actually pretty fun. So I'd probably give this game like a 7.4-ish. I would say it's slightly better than Infinite Warfare. I think it's probably the best COD on the console. Alright, next up is Crimes and Punishment Sherlock Holmes. This is actually one of the games I think is really underrated for the console. It's a kind of mystery game where you kind of just, they'll get like a case, you'll solve the case using a bunch of different like clues and stuff like that you find. You conclude the investigation basically at any point near the end of looking at it for all the clues. So you can actually get a lot of them wrong if you're not thoroughly looking for everything and like putting it all together. So this game's actually a lot of fun if you're into even like crime movies or crime shows. Even if you're not a gamer, this is one I would definitely recommend. I'll probably give this game like a 7.7. Alright, next up is Destiny. Like, as of today's standard for this game's a solid 0, because you know you can't play this game really anymore. Like, this, I think the servers are still up, but there's no point because Destiny 2 is out, so everybody's playing that. When it was out and was active, I would probably give this game like a 5.5, like barely above average type thing. The raids were fun, but there was so lack of content throughout this game's existence, and the DLC practices were horrible for this game. But the combat and leveling up was a lot of fun, and the multiplayer was fun. So I would say it was probably just a slightly above average game, like a 5.5. Alright, next up is Deus Ex Mankind Divided. This game is actually pretty good. I was really hoping they were going to capitalize off of Human Revelations and keep this game series going really well. And they did. I thought this game was done really well. I don't think it was as good as Human Revelations in my opinion, but the story was still good, the combat was still good, the stealth mechanics were still good, the leveling up, which is one of my favorite parts about these games, it was still really good, and this is definitely a really good first-person stealth RPG. And I would probably give this game like an 8.2. Alright, next up is Doom. In terms of just having fun playing a game and like sitting down and just want to play a game for a couple of minutes, this is probably one of the best. The story is not really a story in terms of, it's just like there's the evil aliens, kill the evil aliens type thing. That's basically the story. But the combat is probably some of the smoothest and fun feeling first person shooter combat I've played in a while. It's Doom, so it's very gory, there's a lot of metal music, and you're just going around shooting aliens with cool weapons. So definitely, if you're if you're not into the goriness, stay away from the game. But if you're into that, this game's at least a solid 8.5. Alright, next up is Dragon Age Inquisition. For a Dragon Age game, this is probably not one of the best. But in terms of an RPG, this game was pretty good. But this one was alright. The story was still there, it was still good, and the companions and the character development was still there. It's just the combat and the open world style didn't really intrigue me. I would give this game probably somewhere around a 7.5, 7.6-ish. Alright, next up is Dying Light, aka The Way Dead Island Should Have Been Done. This is basically a parkour-based first-person action game. So you kind of either use melee weapons or guns in order to fight off zombies, and there's a day and night system where zombies get stronger at night. There's a decent campaign and a decent amount of missions. I would say it's a pretty decent game. I'd probably give this game somewhere around a 7.2. Alright, next up is Dynasty Warriors 8 Extreme Legends Complete Edition. So this one I accidentally bought because I thought it was Empires. It's still a pretty good Dynasty Warrior game. The combat's still smooth, has a decent story. I can never really get into the story. The cutscenes and dialogue are always way too long for me, and I just don't really get interested in it because it's such a long stemming story. But it's always fun to put in for a little bit and hack around in, so I'd probably give this game somewhere around a 7. Alright, next up is Skyrim. This game needs to stop coming out on different consoles. I bought this one mainly because the PS3 one, the loading times are ridiculous, and this one came with all of the DLC as well. So if you're buying a version of Skyrim, definitely recommend getting the Xbox One or PS4 versions of this, just for the load times alone. And everything runs smoother and looks a little nicer type thing. Or just get the PC one, you can mod the crap out of it and have a lot of fun with that. Skyrim by itself, I'd probably give it somewhere around like a 9 or a high 8. Alright, next up is the game I talk about way too much on this channel, as Everybody's Golf, or the Japanese named version of Hot Shots Golf. They just, I guess, are carrying on with Everybody's Golf now, just as the total title for it for all regions. This game's still really good, plays exactly like a Hot Shots game, arcade golf style of game that has some challenge to it but is easy to pick up. There's still a ladder system, so you go through different tournaments, different verses to unlock gear, and different tiers of maps and stuff like that. The only difference is you play as your individual character that you create. You don't play as a bunch of different characters that you unlock, which I think is a downfall. I like playing as the different characters. I'd probably give this game still somewhere around like an 8.5. I really love the Hot Shots games personally, and this one still plays really well. Alright, next up is Fallout 4. As I say always for this game is a good RPG and a good shooter, but a bad Fallout game. They got rid of a lot of the perk systems in terms of the uniqueness of the perks and not being able to make a jack of all trades that can just be good at everything. And they got rid of a lot of the text-to-speech stuff, and like having your perks and your levels in each perks actually matter in terms of conversations or different things and pathways you could open up through the campaign. And I just think the storytelling and the area that was located wasn't as interesting as games like 3 or New Vegas. But that being said, the Far Harbor DLC was actually really good. That was the only time I was like, wow, this is actually feels like one of the older Fallout games, and it was actually really good. So overall, I'd probably give this game still like an 8 or like an 8.1-ish. Still a very good game. still would recommend it as a first-person RPG, just not one of the better Fallout games. Alright, next up is Far Cry 4 Limited Edition. This game was alright. I would just say it's a crappier version of 3. Basically the same thing, nothing really done new. First-person RPG, decent gameplay mechanics, some stealth mechanics. The story was okay, but again, it just felt like a cheapened 3, so I'd probably give this game somewhere around like a 7. Alright, next up is Far Cry 5. This one, on the other hand, was actually really good. I really enjoyed the story in this game. You kind of play against like a crazy religious cult type thing, and I thought the area and the whole cult vibe and the different characters, especially Joseph Seed, was actually very interesting to watch and play through. So I'd probably give this game somewhere around, I would say like an 8. It's definitely one of the better Far Cry games I've played. This and 3 are probably the best. Alright, next up is Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise. If you're looking for a really good beat-em-up game that has a pretty funny campaign, I would definitely recommend this game. It's a little gory, but that's kind of the whole deal with this game. Your guy's basically some ninja that works with a fighting style called Hotoshikin, I'm pretty sure. And you go around kind of just beating up people and trying to find your lost wife. It's actually a really good game. I was surprised with how well done the story was, and all the side characters were really interesting. They all had their interesting like secondary quests and stuff like that. And there's a lot of funny mini games that really make this game feel really unique in a way. It's definitely a lot like Yakuza, but I haven't played those ones yet. But I played this one, definitely would recommend it. I'd probably give this game somewhere around like an 8.3. Really good game. Alright, next up is Grand Theft Auto 5. I would say this is actually one of the better Grand Theft Autos. Me personally, it's one of the ones I've gotten to in the most. I thought the campaign was really well done. I like the dynamics of having 3 characters instead of 1 and having all their stories tie in. You get all their different personalities and stuff like that. So I would definitely recommend this game. The multiplayer is still active if you're into that. There's a lot of different like role-playing servers and all that stuff if you get like the PC version. But just the PS4 version itself, I'd probably give it somewhere around a 7.9. Alright, next up is Homefront Revolutions. Pretty good game in terms of if you don't like shooters and don't like having fun. This game was buggy as shit when it came out, so I would definitely not recommend it. They probably patched it, I don't know, but the way I played through it, it was like crashing every 2 seconds. The missions were boring, the areas were boring. It sucks because the first game was actually really fun, and I think it's one of the hidden gems on the PS3. But this one was definitely not. This game's like a 3. Alright, next up is Infamous Second Son. Definitely one of the better PlayStation exclusives still on the console, and is one of the early release games for it. If you like the Infamous games, they're like third-person hack and slash games, beat-em-up games, mixed with some third-person shooting and power mechanics. Really good story. Definitely recommend it. Probably give this game somewhere around like an 8.5, 8.3 range. Alright, next up is Injustice 2. In my opinion, one of the better fighters, if not the best fighter on the console. Really good, made by the same people that made Mortal Kombat, so that's NetherRealms. It's a 2D playing style of fighter, and it has a really good story, which NetherRealms is always really good at putting into their games. So overall, I'd probably give this game somewhere around a 9. I think it's really good, and the gear system I thought was a really fun way to customize your character. Alright, next up is Horizon Zero Dawn. This is kind of like a third-person action RPG. This game was hailed as one of the better exclusives for the console, and I would agree with that. I don't think it's the best. I would still go with either Infamous or the Uncharted games, personally. But this game was actually really good. The main story and the characters in this game were really cool, and the kind of like era this was based in that they tried to make the world was really interesting, and it plays really well and it looks beautiful. I would definitely give this game probably around, I would say somewhere around like an 8.1-ish. Alright, next up is Killzone Shadowfall. The graphics still hold up really well and look really good. So if you're looking for just the graphics wise, this game is definitely worth it. Story wise, it's okay. It's definitely not one of the best Killzone games. I would say 3 or 2 take that title. Still plays like a decent first person shooter. I'd probably give this game somewhere around a 7. Alright, next up is Knack. Besides this game being a giant meme, it's actually an okay puzzle game. It's definitely made for kids, but the difficulty is not made for kids. For some reason, this game has some really hard spikes in skill level needed for some reason for a kids game. Overall, the story is just kind of kiddie, like coming of age style of story. It's an okay game. I'd probably give this game somewhere like a 6. It's slightly above average. Alright, next up is The Last of Us Remastered. I just got this because I never played it on the PS3. So I picked it up on the PS4 early just to have something to play through on the PS4. And this game's actually amazing. It's a third-person kind of action RPG mixed with stealth mechanics. Very heavily story-driven, and the story is amazing in this game. Really excited for the second one. I would probably give this game somewhere around like an 8.5. It's definitely one of the better PlayStation exclusives to ever come out. Alright, next up we're starting to get into my tiny level Lego collection. So first up's The Hobbit. Not really one of my favorite. I enjoyed The Hobbit, the movie. The Lego game still gets the story pretty decent. It's just not really one of my favorite Lego games personally. I'd probably give this game like a 5, average game. Alright, then we have the Lego movie, the video game. This game's actually pretty decent. I would say it's slightly better than The Hobbit. Lego game. It's again just another Lego game. Basically, you go around in third person, punching stuff and collecting bricks and characters. I'd probably give this game somewhere around like a 5.5. I would just put Lego games as average games besides the pretty good standout ones. Not because they're bad games, just because they're always the same thing over and over and over again. And it's always just a fun playthrough, really. Alright, then we got, in my opinion, one of the better Lego games, actually. This and the Star Wars games are probably my favorite. This is Lego Marvel Superheroes. So this one was actually really good. It has a really cool open world, which I think is one of the best parts of this. And it's just always fun playing with superheroes, and they can get really creative with like the Lego powers that they have and stuff like that. So this is probably my favorite. I'd probably give this game somewhere around a 7. It's definitely one of the better Lego games in my opinion. Alright, next we got Light Jump Battle Mage. This game's like a first-person mage shooter RPG type thing. And this game, unless they update it a lot, is buggy as crap. Don't buy this game. It's like Homefront. I would probably give this game like a 3. The concept's cool though, at least. If they actually didn't have the bugs that this game's have, I'd probably give it somewhere around like a 6 or 7. The concept's actually really neat. Just execution wasn't there. Alright, next up is Madden 18. Just like every other Madden game, standard football game. In my opinion, the long shot campaign in this was actually pretty fun and interesting. Other than that, standard Madden game, give it like a 6 because of the long shot. Brings it to be above an average Madden game. Then we get Madden 25. This is like as average of a Madden game as you can get. I think this was like the first one to get on the PS4. Average 5, maybe even lower as a 4. It's not one of the better Madden games I've played. Alright, next up is Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. As I said before, this game was really disappointing for me. I really enjoy Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Ultimate on the Vita, which I have, and I really like the fast-paced nature of it, the 3v3 combat, the constant like switching out and large combos you can get. This game basically doesn't do any of that besides the large combos, and they slow down the fighting style a lot, and the campaign was nowhere near as good as other fighting games on the console, and the arcade mode is really bad compared to Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and the roster is nowhere near as good. So I would definitely put this game as like a 4. It was really underwhelming for me personally. Speaking of underwhelming games, Mass Effect Andromeda. I am a huge fan of the original Mass Effect games, probably one of my favorite series of all time. This game was not, and I just pretend it doesn't exist. It was basically, there was a couple, okay. The only good parts to this game are the parts where you go on like the character specific missions to learn about like their history and go through specific linear campaign maps. Those parts felt like Mass Effect, and interacting with the characters in this game, that felt like the original Mass Effect games. But then they decided to make the whole thing open world and driving around in a boring car. Like, the part that everybody hates about the first game, and they just plow that in everywhere. So that part was really insanely boring. So this game's like a 4. Alright, next up is a demo put into a game case. This game came out before 5, just kind of like tease the 5, and also so they can make a ton of money off of it. And it's like 15 minutes long. Don't buy it. This game's like a solid 1. Alright, next up is Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. I actually fully didn't get through this game, but what I played through it was actually really good. The stealth mechanics are still there. They're still really good. The story was pretty interesting. So overall, this is like any other Metal Gear play. It's a third-person stealth game with some first-person mechanics put into it. Very like light-hearted, serious style of a campaign. I'd probably give this game somewhere around an 8. Alright, next up is Metro Redux. So this is Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light remade for the PS4. If you're looking for a really good first-person shooter with an amazing campaign, this is definitely one I would recommend. It's 2 games remade. If you haven't played them, definitely buy this. They look a lot nicer and play a lot nicer than the PS3 ones. I honestly, this is one of the better campaign first-person shooters that I could recommend that I've played so far. So for that, I would give this game somewhere around like an 8.1. Alright, next up is Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. This game's actually really interesting because it's kind of a cross between a bunch of different games that already exist, just put into the Lord of the Rings kind of era. So it's a mix of the new Tomb Raider games based off of the like item finding and exploration features, mixed with Assassin's Creed for the stealth mechanics, mixed with the Arkham Knight games for the combat. And it actually does it really well and has a pretty good story. I'd probably give this game somewhere like a 7.5. It was actually really surprising for what I thought it was going to be. Alright, next up is Minecraft. It's Minecraft. Like, basically Legos in a game. You build stuff. It's fun. PS4 version, only hindrance is that it's not as expansive in terms of the area that you can go through like a PC version. I don't know if they've updated that, but it's Minecraft. It feels better on a mouse and keyboard, but it still plays really well on the console. So it's Minecraft. Give it like a 7.5. Alright, next up we got Monster Hunter World. As this game would apply, you go around hunting monsters. It's basically like a hack and slash game where you only fight bosses mainly. You fight some smaller animals and monsters, but mainly focus on hunting down and gaining resources from the bigger monsters and more rare monsters. In my opinion, if you have a friend to play through this game with, it's actually really fun. I find this is one of the better co-op games available on the PS4. By yourself, I personally find this game extremely boring by myself, but that just might be me. I've never really been into the hack and slash games too much, so that just might be why. It's still a really well-made game. Personally, I have to be playing with people to find this game interesting, so for that reason, I would give this game like a 7.5. Alright, next up is Murder Soul Suspect. So this game's actually, in my opinion, probably the most underrated game on the console. So this is like a kind of mystery game where you solve your own murder. You basically turn into a ghost and you go around solving your own murder through like the ghost realm, and you learned all about the realm that you're in and how it mixes with the alive realm and the fully dead realm. It's actually very interesting to play through, and the story's actually really well done. It has some stealth mechanics and kind of just point and click adventure game style mechanics to it. I would definitely recommend this game if you're really into the mystery games, or you just like a really good story in your games. I would highly recommend this one. I'd probably give this game somewhere around an 8. I just think it's really underrated and not talked about enough. Alright, next up we got all the basketball games. In my opinion, the only good ones out of this are NBA 2K14 and NBA Live 18. Those are, I think, the best. The other two aren't that good. I'm just doing these all together because I have so many of them, and you know, you don't want to see me go through basketball games. But in my opinion, 14, probably around a 7. I think it's one of the better NBA games I've played. 16, probably somewhere around a 5. It's an average basketball game. 18, I would say somewhere around like a 6 or 7. It's definitely a pretty good game and has some of the better My Team elements I've played. And then 19 for NBA Live was just garbage. Don't get it. It's like a 3. Alright, next up is NBA 2K Playgrounds 2. So I was a little hesitant to get this basically because it's like My Team where you have to get cards to get players. And with the 2K games, it's usually very hard and very stingy to get cards, in my opinion. But in this game, I was actually pretty surprised. It actually plays like a modern version of NBA Jam, I would say. Not as good, but pretty good and pretty fun. It has a decent campaign mode where you go through a campaign like a mini season, and if you win the playoffs, you get a special card or a special unlock character for that thing. So it kind of has like a arcade old school fighting game style of unlocking new characters for your teams. And also you get from packs, which packs guarantee you 4 players, and there's really high rates of getting actually good players. So this is one I would definitely say is a really good game in terms of if you're looking for an arcadey basketball game to play on the modern consoles. I think it's the only one of its type on the modern consoles. So I actually definitely recommend this game. I'd probably give it like a 7.5. Alright, next up is Need for Speed Rivals. This is one of the early released racing games for the console. I usually like the Need for Speed games, and this game was pretty good. I would definitely say I prefer playing, this is one you can play as either the cops or the racers, and they have like a big open world map, and there's different modes based on if you're playing as a cop or a racer. So the cop has kind of chase down modes, and catching up and knocking out kind of criminal riders and stuff like that. And the street racers, you have ones where you're trying to get away from the cops. You have just regular street racing events. You have time trial. And another positive thing about this game is the customization. There's a lot of customization in this game. I'd probably give this game like a 6.5 if it's an above average racer. And alright, next up we got NHL 15, which is the one NHL game I've gotten for the PS4. And there's a good reason for that. This game was basically the bare bone version of NHL. They basically took all the features that are interesting in this game and gutted them because it was a new console version, and they just wanted to pump out one while NHL 15 was still relevant. This game's garbage, don't get it. I don't know how the new ones are, but this one's definitely not worth it. I would give this game like a 2. Alright, next up is The Order 1886. This is the collector's edition. It came with this statue right here, which is the main character just like crouching behind the wall with his weapon. It's actually pretty detailed, and I actually like it a lot. So this is a first-person shooter, based in kind of like I would say like fantasy. I think it's a London it's based in, and you go around hunting monsters and vampires and stuff like that. And it's actually pretty interesting, and the story is actually really well done, especially near the end. The beginning is definitely a little slow, and there's definitely a lot of set action pieces and set story pieces instead of like gameplay. So that's definitely one of the downfalls of the game. But overall, I think the story actually makes it worthwhile to pick up, and it's a console exclusive for the PS4. So I would probably give this game like a solid 7. I don't think it deserves the hate it gets as much as other people, but I definitely see some of the points with it being so short. Alright, then we got Persona 5. Persona 5 is, in my opinion, not as good as 4. That will be definitely a controversial opinion, but that's just my opinion. It's still a very good game, still has the great turn-based combat that Persona games are known for, still has the really cool school mechanics, and getting into relationships and building bonds with certain characters throughout the story is always interesting in these games. In my opinion, I just think the story was a little flatter and the characters were a little flatter than in Persona 4. That's just my opinion though. A lot of people prefer this game over 4. I can definitely see that. In my opinion, I find 4 to be the best Persona game I've played so far. Overall, still a really good game. I'd give this game like an 8. Alright, next up is Prey. This is actually one of the more unique games I have on the console. It's made by Bethesda. It's a first-person shooter, kind of survival RPG, where you kind of play as a scientist on a space station, and a bunch of like aliens attack the space station, and you're trying to figure out why. You have powers and stuff like that. So it's actually a really interesting game, and story wise it was actually a lot of fun to play through, and the story is really well developed. Gameplays wise, it's kind of like a BioShock game where you have very limited ammo and you gotta go around collecting stuff. You have a tree that you level up certain abilities, and there's a bunch of different weapons and powers you can use throughout the game. So I would definitely recommend this game. I'd probably give this game somewhere around a 7.7 ish. It's a definitely really good game. Alright, next up is Ratchet and Clank. This is just a remake of the first game and kind of tied in with the movie that came out, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years ago. This game is actually really good. I personally think it runs better and plays a lot better than the original Ratchet and Clank game. I think they smoothed out the combat and a lot of like the animations that were in the first game, and it just looks a lot better. And I just really enjoyed this game. I platinumed this game. It's an easy platinum, and it's just really fun platforming and third-person shooting combat in a game, and hack and slash mechanics with some really cool, unique boss fights. So these are definitely PlayStation classics that any PlayStation owner should get into. This game's, in my opinion, is probably somewhere around like an 8.5. Alright, next up is Saints Row 4. This is the Get Out of Hell edition. So this just basically comes with the DLC for the 4th game. I bought this game, and I also have the original 4th one on the PlayStation 3. This game definitely runs a lot smoother and plays a lot better than the one on the PlayStation 3, and the DLC is definitely fun and worth it. If you haven't played the Saints Row games, they're basically like Grand Theft Auto in terms of third-person action and shooting, but they're very over the top and go for more of a comedic story, more than like a serious story with comedic undertones. So this game I would definitely recommend. You're basically a superhero almost. You get like powers, and you have an ability tree, and you get all these different guns that you get to upgrade. It's just a lot of fun, and if you're looking for a very good co-op game, definitely recommend these games. I would probably give this game somewhere around an 8. Alright, next up is Shadow Warriors. So it's basically a first-person shooter, very heavily focused on the older school style of first-person shooters with a lot of action, very fast and fluent combat mechanics with a lot of gore. You get like health packs, there's like upgrades and stuff like that. You have melee attacks, which kind of just slice and dice through enemies. You can use a sword, and your character is just like the classic arcadey, witty kind of one-liner action hero dude. It's definitely a really good game. There's no real story to it, but the combat and the enemy types in this game are really worth it. I'd probably give this game somewhere around like a 7.7-ish. Alright, next up is my only baseball game, which I think is the most recent one. That's the show 19. It's a pretty good baseball game. Like the My Team in this is pretty good. The campaign is pretty fun, playing through your own like career as a baseball player. I got this because I really haven't played one since the PSP, and I was just looking to play a baseball game. It's an average baseball game. I'd give it like a 6. Alright, next up is Soul Calibur 6. This is one I was actually looking forward to because I played 5 a lot on the PS3. I just couldn't really get into this one, but the campaign was pretty decent. It still plays like a really good Soul Calibur game. It's cool that they added the girl from The Witcher as the side character. I'm a big Witcher fan, so that was definitely cool to see. Overall, probably just give this game like a 7.5, just because it didn't really grab my attention for some reason. But 5, I can't really put my finger on it why. But the customization and the gameplay is still there. It still feels like a really good Soul Calibur game though. Alright, next up is South Park: The Fractured Butthole. If you're into the South Park movies or TV show in any way, shape, or form, you'll really love these games, and I really love this game. It basically plays like you're playing through a TV show version of South Park, but as a game. It looks exactly and feels exactly like the TV show, which a lot of TV show games don't really get right. They kind of lose some of the charm. This one feels exactly like the TV show, and it kind of has a turn-based style of combat system, which worked really well with the comedic values in this game. Definitely, if you're not into crude humor, don't like South Park, don't get it. But if you like South Park in any way, this game is awesome. I would give this game somewhere around probably like an 8.9. Alright, next up is Thief. It's definitely a below average stealth game. The stealth mechanics are there at times, but definitely the AI is pretty dumb in this game, and the story kind of takes a wild turn 3/4 of the way through, and you're kind of just sitting there like, why? At least I was. The beginning's definitely interesting, but it kind of loses me after that, so I'd probably give this game somewhere around like a 4. It's a slightly below average game. Alright, next up is Tomb Raider the Definitive Edition. So this is the remake, the first one of the remakes. I really enjoyed this game, actually. It's basically just an Uncharted game, but with Tomb Raider, which I guess Tomb Raider is the original Uncharted. But this one plays exactly like the modern Uncharted games, basically. It has a pretty good story, actually, too. The new version of Lara Croft is actually very interesting. It's not like I don't like the older version, it's just the new version was actually likable as well. And I definitely would recommend this game if you're into the Uncharted games in any fashion, or you just like a really good third-person shooter with some climbing puzzle mechanics in it. I'd probably give this game somewhere around like a 7.5. Alright, next up is Vampire. This is one that definitely went under a lot of people's radar when it came out. It's basically a Witcher-style fighting game where it's kind of like a third-person hack-and-slash game mixed with some powers that you can use. So there's like shields, there's different types of attack ones, there's buff ones, there's debuffs, there's ones you can use to like kind of stall or lift up enemies to deal massive damage to, kind of like special attacks. And it has a very detailed upgrading tree, so it's an RPG as well. What really drew me to this game was the story. The era and the characters that you run into are very interesting in this game, and the story of the main character, who is a doctor turned recently into a vampire, so you're learning like how he deals with becoming a vampire and the moral dilemmas from either feeding on people or saving them type thing. It's actually really interesting. The only issue is the choices you make don't really have an effect on the story too much. It's more just good bad choices, kind of like an Infamous game. But in my opinion, this game's still really good. I would probably give this game somewhere around like an 8.1. Alright, next up is The Walking Dead Season 2. For those of you who don't know about the Telltale games, they're basically point-and-click games with some quick time events put into them. Very good stories, and they kind of allude to the fact that you got choices, but don't really have choices, because just like Vampire, they kind of enter the same ending, just with slightly different either people surviving or slightly different pathways and what's said type thing. The stories are still really good. I definitely still enjoyed this game. I would probably give this game somewhere around a 7. Alright, then we got Watch Dogs. I'm pretty sure the second one of this is coming out soon. This is like a Grand Theft Auto style of game in terms of the open world and third-person shooting. It's definitely not as good as this or Grand Theft Auto or Saints Row, but definitely has its own unique taste. You basically play as a hacker, and you can kind of hack into people's phones or different things throughout the cities to help on your missions, help gain money, help do certain secondary quests. That part's definitely unique, but other than that, it feels just kind of like a not as good GTA game. So I would probably give this game somewhere around a 6. Alright, next up is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. In my opinion, is the best game on the PS4 that I've played. This game is really amazing. It's a third-person hack and slash out of the game, and you also get powers in the game, kind of like, which are signs. You basically play as Geralt, who's a witcher. He goes around hunting monsters, and also has a main story, which I won't spoil anything from, because I think this is one game that you just got to play the story and really get into it to really fully embrace this game. And I would definitely recommend anybody pick this game up if you're a fan of Western RPGs in any way, or looking to get into one. I'd probably give this game somewhere around a 9.3. This is probably in my top 10 games of all time, and it's at least definitely in my top 10 PS4 games of all time. Alright, next up is Wolfenstein: The New Order. This is one of the earlier release first-person shooters for the PS4. Definitely one of the better ones still. I think it really holds up well. The combat and the story was actually really well done. The story is not anything like super drawn out, but this one's all about if the Nazis or something like the Nazis won World War II and took over. So then you're living like kind of under the regime and working in a rebellion. And it's actually really interesting. And the story and side characters you meet in this game are actually pretty cool. And overall, I would actually really recommend this game. It has a really cool tree-based system for your upgrades for your characters. You can play more stealth ways, or you can just run and gun the whole thing. So it definitely gives you choices, and this game's just a bunch of fun to play through. I'd probably give this game somewhere around like a 7.3. Alright, and finally reaching the end, we got WWE 2K15. Basically, this is just a WWE game, not as good as the old ones. This is when they've gotten past the old style of games and kind of went into an upgrade system similar to the 2K basketball games, if any of you know that. And they got rid of where you would press the left trigger to reverse a standard like punch or kick attack, and then right to reverse a grab. So there was some sort of skill and timing involved into it, where now you just spam the right trigger as much as you can until you reverse something, because it's all done on one button. And like honestly, the campaign was pretty cool, going through and upgrading your character. But other than that, I would recommend the old ones over this. I'd probably give this game somewhere around a 5. It's an average game. Alright, that is the end of my PS4 video. That is all my games that I have for 2019, and ones I've collected throughout my years of owning the console since it came out. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Definitely, if you guys have any more recommendations for any videos, or if you would like to see any PS4 related videos specifically, let me know. I'm definitely going to do a hidden gems video after this video, so look forward to that. And just remember, everybody has nerdiness at their core.